If you're having trouble keeping the engine running in your truck when you go to drop it down in gear and have to kind of use both feet to drive to hold the gas down a little bit to keep the engine from stalling, or if you go to, if you're at a stoplight and you go to turn on your air conditioning system and the engine runs really rough and starts to stall out, there could be a few things causing that, and I'll try to point some of the most common culprits here. On this truck has the 351 Windsor V8 engine, which is laid out a lot like the Ford 5-liter, the 302. And the 460 would have the throttle body and everything, I believe, toward the middle and toward the back. But when that problem happens, one of the first things to look for is this idle air control valve right here. What this does is it bypasses the throttle plates and helps maintain an engine idle. And one thing you can do to check out to see if this is the culprit is to have the engine running, if it will run, and pull off this connector. When you pull the connector off, the engine either will die out completely or run very slow to the point where it almost will die. And I've got a valve. I did the valve on this truck actually back in October last year. Here's a box that came in, and here's what that valve looks like. Comes with a new gasket and everything. And this valve actually ended up failing electrically. It's got high resistance in the contacts, so the coils inside burned up. And it's starting to rain. Put that back. So that's the first thing I would look for, is that idle air control valve right there. It's either dirty inside or or it failed electrically. These are about anywhere between $35 and $75. If you have the money, I'd go ahead and get the best one you can. One of the other things it could be is the EGR valve might be partially stuck in the open position, and that's leading out your mixture too much, causing it to run really bad and maybe stall. And that will usually set a code, because it'll keep this sensor off of its seat. But if not, what you can do is you can pull the vacuum line off of here and then tap into one of the other vacuum lines back there. There is a good one right there that's not even being used. And with the engine running, you can apply that vacuum hose to the valve real quick. It'll cause that valve to go up, and you should hear a change in the engine idle speed. That'll let you know if that EGR valve is functioning or not. And speaking of vacuum, it could also be, plain and simple, an old-fashioned vacuum leak. These Fords, a lot of times the vacuum lines here tend to dry out and they will crack, especially if you're working on it and you go to move it around. That happened to me right there. You can see I spliced the two hoses together with a piece of wiper hose right there. And it also happened to me with the outdoor air actuator motor. I just have a piece of wiper hose connected to the factory vacuum line right there, because these lines, they get really brittle and are easy to crack, and you get a vacuum leak, or whatever sensor that feeds loses signal, and it causes your engine to run really rough. And a good sensor, or a good example of a sensor that would be affected, would be this mass airflow sensor, or not, on the manifold absolute pressure sensor. You can take this vacuum source off and also listen for a change in the engine idle speed. So just make sure that you have all these vacuum lines hooked in the right place, that they're not cracked. And check your EGR valve, as well as the idle air control valve. And if you do those things, more than likely you will have gotten to the source of your problem. It'll take a little bit of time, especially what I would do is I would start with the vacuum lines first, because that's basically free. If you find out that it's a vacuum leak, you just buy yourself a cheap length of washer hose and fix it and you're done. I would do that before I would invest any money in an IAC valve or anything like that, because they are about $75, at least in my area they are. So just kind of start simple and work your way up toward the more expensive parts. But they're very easy to check. Just take the connector off, listen for a change in idle speed, move the EGR valve, listen for a change in idle speed, and same thing with the map sensor. That'll kind of help you narrow in on what the source of the trouble could be.